The Wolf's Den. The road to nowhere felt oddly welcoming to Samantha Harper. Her tiny car wheezed its way up the winding mountain path, every bump and pothole a firm reminder of her questionable decision-making skills. The little town finally came into view, perched on the edge of civilization like it wasn't quite sure it wanted to belong. Samantha, however, had made up her mind this was going to be her fresh start, whether the town liked it or not. Her arrival didn't exactly scream hero's welcome. The locals watched her like she'd just rolled in with a circus of dancing llamas. At the diner, forks paused mid-air, coffee mugs froze mid-sip, and conversations fizzled into awkward silence. Samantha pretended not to notice, her best "I'm totally not bothered" smile plastered across her face. It didn't help that her new cabin, a cozy little spot, tucked against the forest's edge, looked more like a set from a haunted house movie than a place anyone sane would live. Inside, the cabin felt lived in, but not in a warm, fuzzy way. Dust bunnies had unionized in her absence. Cobwebs draped the corners like macabre holiday decorations, and something in the air smelled faintly off. Still, she saw potential if potential meant scrubbing floors until her hands went numb. The next morning, Samantha stepped outside with a steaming mug of coffee, ready to embrace her new mountain life. But her cheerful moment was interrupted by something carved into her front door. Claw marks deep, jagged, and far too big to belong to the neighborhood raccoon. She squinted at them, half convinced she was seeing things, but nope. They were real, and they were terrifying. Samantha did the logical thing. She strolled into town, expecting to find some neighborly advice, or at the very least, someone willing to explain the local wildlife situation. Instead, she got cryptic warnings from a wiry old man near the general store. He mentioned something about territorial wolves, and gave her the kind of look people usually reserve for ghosts or overly enthusiastic salesmen. Wolves? Samantha laughed it off inside her head, of course. Outwardly, she nodded politely and backed away slowly. By the third day, Samantha's attempt to blend in with the locals had evolved into a full-blown survival strategy. Avoid eye contact, keep your head down, and don't ask too many questions. That worked right up until she crossed paths with Connor. He appeared out of nowhere, like a magazine model who'd been being photoshopped into the woods. His forest ranger uniform clung to him in all the right ways, and his sharp green eyes could probably see through walls or secrets. Samantha wasn't sure which made her more nervous. Connor seemed nice enough, though there was something unsettling about how easily he moved between friendly neighbor and guy who could snap a tree branch with his bare hands. He offered advice: don't wander into the woods, especially after dark. His smile was warm, but his tone suggested this wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning with a capital W. Samantha thanked him, of course, but her curiosity was officially piqued. Wolves, claw marks, secretive townsfolk, and now a ridiculously attractive forest ranger with too many secrets. If she didn't know better, she'd think she'd wandered into the first chapter of a cheesy romance novel. For now, though, she decided to follow Connor's advice and stay indoors at night, at least until she figured out what exactly was lurking in the shadows, or until the shadows came knocking on her door. And so, Samantha's fresh start in the quiet mountain town was off to a roaring start, or perhaps a howling one. Something told her life here was about to get much more complicated than cleaning dusty cabins and dodging awkward small town stares. Samantha's life in her quaint mountain cabin was just starting to feel normal, well, as normal as life could be in a town where everyone acted like you were a walking curse. She'd adjusted to the eerie stares, the cryptic warnings, and the fact that the coffee at the diner was only slightly better than sludge. But when she learned the previous tenant of her cabin had vanished without a chance, her curiosity perked up like a cat spotting a dangling string. Disappeared. No forwarding address. Not even a goodbye note. It felt like a juicy mystery she couldn't resist poking with a stick. She started asking questions around town, but the answers were about as helpful as a broken umbrella in a hurricane. The locals clammed up faster than you could say missing person, their eyes darting to the woods like they expected something or someone to lunge out at any moment. Then came the folklore. Oh, the glorious, ridiculous folklore. Werewolves, ancient curses, full moons, and territorial pacts. Samantha almost rolled her eyes into another dimension. Sure, there were weird claw marks on her door, but wolves. Big bad wolves with secret societies and vendettas. That was the kind of thing you found in poorly written novels, not real life. She scribbled folklore at the bottom of her mental list of priorities, right under figure out how to unclog the bathroom sink. The woods behind her cabin were a sprawling maze of shadowy trees and whispering leaves, the kind of place that screamed "do not enter," but also whispered "I dare you." Naturally, Samantha ventured in, armed with her trusty phone flashlight and about 3 ounces of courage. She wandered deeper than she probably should have. That's when she saw it, a bloodied talisman, dangling from a low branch like some grotesque Christmas ornament. It was shaped like a claw, its edges jagged and menacing, as if warning her to back off. Samantha's stomach turned, but she told herself it was just some creepy prank. Kids being kids, right? She shoved it into her pocket because why not? What's the worst that could happen? Famous last thoughts. The air shifted, growing colder, heavier, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Then came the sound, a low growl that seemed to vibrate in her chest. Samantha froze, her flashlight shaking in her hand. And then, out of the darkness, it appeared. A wolf. No, scratch that. A massive wolf. This thing wasn't just big. It was unreasonably big, like a creature that had absolutely no business existing outside of a monster movie. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, its teeth bared in a snarl that said, "I'm not here to cuddle." Samantha ran. She didn't scream, she was too busy trying not to trip over every root and rock in her path. The wolf didn't chase her, not immediately. It watched her for a moment, its gaze almost calculating. Then, with a huff that sounded suspiciously like a wolf sighing in disappointment, it slinked back into the shadows. Samantha burst into her cabin, slammed the door, and slid to the floor, panting like she'd just run a marathon while being chased by death itself. Her mind raced, replaying the encounter, but she told herself it was just an oversized wolf, a freak of nature. Nothing supernatural about it. Connor showed up the next day, his presence filling the room like some rugged hero stepping out of a romance novel. His expression was calm, but his eyes had a sharpness that could slice steel. Samantha didn't even get a chance to downplay her near-death experience before Connor spilled the beans. Werewolves. The town was crawling with them. Packs, territories, unspoken rules. Oh, and by the way, her cabin just so happened to sit smack in the middle of their turf. Welcome to the neighborhood, where the Hoa was a pack of supernatural predators. Samantha's jaw metaphorically hit the floor. Werewolves, real, living, breathing werewolves. The claw marks. The hostile locals. The wolf in the woods, it all clicked. Like puzzle pieces she didn't want to fit together. She wanted to laugh, cry, and scream at the absurdity of it all. Instead, she just sat there, staring at Connor as he explained the rules of her new reality. And just like that, Samantha Harper's quiet mountain retreat turned into a werewolf-infested soap opera, complete with life or death stakes, and a brooding forest ranger, who probably had more secrets than he had pairs of socks. Something told her life was about to get very interesting. Samantha Harper had always prided herself on her ability to make terrible life choices, but this was next level. Sitting in her cabin with her head spinning from Connor's bombshell about the werewolf situation, she was given 2 choices: pack up her bags, her dignity, and whatever sanity she had left, or agree to live by the rules of the furry Hoa that ran the place. It was like being invited to a very exclusive club, except the initiation involved not dying. Leaving seemed smart, logical, even, But something about her mother's mysterious disappearance and that freaky claw talisman gnawed at her like a mosquito bite she couldn't ignore. So naturally she chose chaos, staying. Because who doesn't want to dive headfirst into a supernatural soap opera? The next day, Lila showed up. Oh, Lila. Imagine a runway model with a sharp edge and an even sharper tongue, strutting into Samantha's cabin like she owned the place. And honestly, she kind of did metaphorically. At least. Samantha barely had time to hide her mismatched socks before Lila announced that she was here to help. Not willingly, of course. Lila's expression was somewhere between bored and seriously her. Mentorship, it turned out, was less how to train your werewolf and more surviving werewolf politics for dummies. Lila explained the pack dynamics with all the enthusiasm of someone reading tax instructions. There were hierarchies, alliances, and unspoken rules. Break one, and you'd find yourself on the wrong end of some very sharp teeth. But the real kicker, Samantha might be connected to the pack's curse. Oh great, just what she needed, a supernatural family heirloom. The curse, Lila explained, was ancient and dramatic, full of blood rituals and betrayal. It was the kind of story that would make a great Netflix series, but for Samantha, it was personal. Apparently, her mother had been dabbling in pack business before she mysteriously disappeared. Samantha wanted to roll her eyes into orbit, but a tiny part of her whispered, "What if it's true?" By now, Samantha was thoroughly confused. One part of her screamed, "Run." Preferably far, far away where werewolves and cryptic curses were just things in fantasy novels. The other part, the nosy part, kept poking at the mystery like a kid testing if the stove was still hot. She couldn't leave. Not yet. Not with so many unanswered questions. But staying meant dealing with Connor. The rugged forest ranger turned werewolf alpha had been annoyingly charming so far, but Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that his charisma came with a side of control issues. He was all smiles and warm eyes until you stepped out of line. Then his presence turned colder than a freezer aisle. Still, she wasn't scared of him, not exactly. And then it happened. The rug was yanked right out from under her, metaphorically speaking, while snooping through the woods. Because subtlety was not Samantha's strong suit, she stumbled upon a pack meeting. Hidden behind a tree, she watched as Connor stood front and center, commanding the group like a king addressing his court. The forest ranger facade, gone. In its place stood Connor the alpha, all power and authority, with a dangerous gleam in his eyes that sent shivers down her spine. So he wasn't just the charming ranger keeping an eye on her. He was the boss, the one everyone else answered to. His easygoing demeanor now felt more like a mask, and Samantha realized she'd been playing with fire. Connor was far more dangerous than she'd thought. Despite every ounce of common sense screaming at her to grab her stuff and bolt, Samantha made her decision. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. The mystery of her mother, the curse, and the pack's dark history was a tangled knot, and she was determined to unravel it. Connor's warnings to stay out of pack business only made her more determined. She'd follow the rules, sure on the surface, but beneath her polite nods and fake smiles, Samantha was gearing up for some serious detective work. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about answers, no matter how dangerous they might be. And if she had to face down an entire pack of werewolves to get them, well, that was a problem for future Samantha. For now, she had secrets to uncover, a cursed pack to navigate, and an alpha to keep an eye on. What could possibly go wrong? Samantha's life had officially turned into the supernatural equivalent of a reality show. One minute she was scrubbing her cabin's floors, trying to forget about curses and werewolves. The next she was standing face to face with Lucas, the rogue werewolf everyone seemed to hate but didn't want to talk about. He had that whole rugged bad boy vibe going. Scruffy beard, scars that told stories, and a smirk that screamed, "I know something you don't." Lucas wasn't shy about spilling tea either. According to him, Connor the charming yet annoyingly bossy alpha wasn't just a control freak. He was a murderous control freak. Lucas claimed Connor had killed the previous cabin owner, Samantha's estranged mother, to hide some shadowy secret. Samantha's brain buzzed like a broken radio. Her mother had been connected to all this. Of course, because why wouldn't her family tree have roots in a cursed pack of werewolves? Despite his charm, which was a different flavor from Connor's, Lucas felt dangerous. Not the kind of dangerous that would rip you apart for fun, but the kind that made you question whether teaming up was a brilliant move or a one-way ticket to bad decisions. Still, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling that Lucas might have answers Connor clearly wasn't giving her. Time spent with Lucas was enlightening. He had a knack for making her second-guess everything she thought she knew about the pack. He talked about forbidden rituals, whispered about power plays, and hinted that Connor's grip on the pack wasn't as natural as it seemed. Samantha hated how much sense it all made. Connor's alpha persona had always felt too polished, too controlled, like a facade he wore for the world. But Lucas wasn't exactly a saint. He had his secrets, his grudges, and a tendency to talk like he was auditioning for a dark and broody anti-hero role. Samantha found herself drawn to him, despite every instinct screaming, "This is a bad idea. Stop. Turn around." And yet she stayed, because apparently ignoring red flags was her new favorite hobby. Fueled by a cocktail of curiosity, paranoia, and a sprinkle of stupidity, Samantha decided to sneak into one of the pack's late-night meetings. She wasn't invited, obviously, but that had never stopped her before. Clad in the least rustling outfit she could find, she crept through the woods, her heart pounding loud enough to wake the dead. The clearing was lit by moonlight. The pack gathered in a semicircle around Connor, who stood like some medieval king holding court. Samantha crouched behind a bush, praying no one had a supernaturally good sense of smell. What she heard made her stomach drop. The pack wasn't just talking about their usual werewolf drama. They were talking about her, the outsider threat. Some of them wanted her gone permanently. Others argued that she might be useful. It was like watching a reality show where you were the unsuspecting contestant, except the prize was survival. Before Samantha could fully process her impending doom, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Lila, her self-appointed mentor and part-time menace. Lila's expression was somewhere between mildly amused and deeply disappointed, as if catching Samantha snooping was more of an inconvenience than a betrayal. Instead of dragging her into the meeting, Lila leaned down and whispered something cryptic. "Not everything is as it seems." Then, like a shadow, she melted back into the gathering. Samantha was left feeling like she'd just been handed a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The next morning, Samantha stomped into Connor's cabin more like cautiously tiptoed, but the stomping was implied. She confronted him, laying out everything she'd learned, the plans to get rid of her, the whispers of forbidden rituals, and Lucas's claim that Connor wasn't the hero he pretended to be. Connor didn't yell or threaten her, but his calm demeanor cracked, just for a second, when she mentioned Lucas. That crack was all Samantha needed to know she'd hit a nerve. Still, Connor managed to deflect her accusations, brushing them off like they were nothing more than idle gossip. But Samantha saw the flicker of something in his eyes, guilt, maybe, or fear. And then, the final twist dropped like a piano in a cartoon. Connor didn't deny his involvement with Lucas's exile, but he added a layer of drama Samantha hadn't seen coming. Lucas wasn't exiled for rebellion. He was exiled for murder. And not just any murder. He'd allegedly killed the cabin's previous owner. Samantha felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. The previous owner, her estranged mother, murdered. By Lucas? By Connor? She didn't know who to believe anymore. Her mother's disappearance, the pack's secrets, the curse, it all came crashing together in a tangled mess. And standing at the center of it was Samantha, caught between two dangerous men, both of whom seemed capable of terrible things. Nothing was as it seemed, indeed. And Samantha was determined to get to the bottom of it, even if it killed her. Which at this rate, it probably would. Samantha Harper wasn't sure what was worse. The fact that she'd gotten herself tangled in werewolf politics, or the fact that her own mother had apparently been the founding member of the hot mess committee that started it all. Either way, she was in deep, and there was no escape hatch in sight. It started innocently enough, if you could call stumbling upon her mum's hidden journal innocent. Tucked away under a loose floorboard in her cabin, the journal was a mix of cryptic notes, frantic sketches, and the kind of handwriting that screamed stress eating cookies at midnight. The biggest bombshell: her mom had been trying to break the pack's curse, not just for them, but for Samantha. A noble goal, except for one tiny problem. Connor's name popped up way too often, paired with phrases like dark rituals and power grab. Yikes! Samantha's head spun faster than a hamster wheel. If Connor had been pulling strings this whole time, what else was he hiding? And Lucas, the rogue wolf with a tragic backstory and dreamy amber eyes. He wasn't off the hook either. Everyone seemed to have blood on their hands figuratively, she hoped. With the journal clutched tightly, Samantha stormed into the metaphorical lion's den, or in this case, the werewolf's den. Connor stood in the center, radiating his usual "I'm the boss, and don't you forget it" energy, while Lucas lingered in the shadows, looking like trouble with a capital T. Samantha dropped her metaphorical bombshell: her mother's death, the curse, the lies. Connor and Lucas, predictably, pointed fingers at each other like kids caught stealing cookies. Connor insisted Lucas was the loose cannon responsible for everything, while Lucas accused Connor of using dark magic to maintain his alpha status. Samantha watched the blame game unfold, her patience wearing thinner than the soles of her boots. Then, like a poorly written soap opera, the pack decided to weigh in. Word of Samantha's discoveries had spread faster than gossip at a high school reunion, and suddenly, the wolves were all barking, pun intended, for answers. Connor's hold on the pack wavered, his usual swagger giving way to uncertainty. The tipping point came when Samantha, exasperated and tired of all the cryptic nonsense, laid out the curse's grim reality. To break it, someone had to pay a blood price. Not just any blood, her blood. Because of course, why wouldn't the solution be something absurdly dramatic and inconvenient? Connor and Lucas both looked at her, their faces a mix of guilt and resignation. For the first time, they were on the same page. Samantha's blood was the key. Not exactly the kind of team-building moment she'd hoped for. If Samantha thought things couldn't get worse, she was wrong. Oh, so very wrong. The curse wasn't just some theoretical family heirloom, it was alive in her, buried deep in her DNA. Apparently, her mom had passed down more than just her stubbornness. If Samantha sacrificed herself, there was a very real chance she wouldn't just die. She might turn. The idea of becoming a full-blown werewolf wasn't exactly on her vision board, but as the pack's eyes bore into her, as Connor and Lucas argued about responsibility and consequences, Samantha realized something critical. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone, the pack, the curse, and her mom's unfinished fight. And so, Samantha stood at the edge of the woods, the full moon casting an eerie glow over the clearing. Her blood hummed with power, her heart a mix of terror and determination. The pack circled her, their tension palpable. Connor, for all his flaws, looked genuinely torn, while Lucas's usual smirk had been replaced with something softer, almost regretful. Samantha took a deep breath. She didn't know how this would end, but she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't going down without a fight. Whether she walked out of this as human, werewolf, or something else entirely, she would make sure her mother's legacy wasn't for nothing. With a steady step, she moved forward, ready to face the curse, the pack, and the wild unknown that awaited her. Because Samantha Harper wasn't just some scared artist running from her past. She was a fighter, even if her battles involved claws, fangs, and way too much drama for one lifetime. Samantha Harper stood at the center of the clearing, her nerves tangled tighter than a bird's nest in a windstorm. The full moon hung overhead like some judgmental spotlight, casting everything in an eerie, silver glow. Around her, the pack paced in restless circles, their eyes darting between her, Connor, and Lucas like spectators waiting for a boxing match. But Samantha wasn't here to fight. Oh no, she had a plan. A bold, ridiculous, probably doomed plan. See, she'd spent the last few sleepless nights poring over her mother's journal, and between the cryptic notes and dramatic underlines, she'd pieced together an alternative way to break the curse, one that didn't involve her, bleeding out. The catch: it required both Connor and Lucas to play nice for once in their lives. Samantha laid it out for them, a ritual to channel the curse into the earth itself, dispersing its energy and neutralizing it for good. No bloodshed, no death, just some weird chanting and enough supernatural theatrics to make a ghost blush. Connor looked skeptical, his alpha ego practically bristling, while Lucas wore the kind of grin that said, "This is insane, but I'm here for it." Still, they agreed, if only because Samantha was the only one with an actual plan. The ritual began with Samantha at the center, her hands pressed against the cold, damp ground. The pack formed a wide circle around her, their breaths visible in the cool night air. Connor and Lucas stood on either side, their combined tension so thick it could have been sliced with a butter knife. As Samantha focused, she felt it, a deep, thrumming energy beneath her palms, ancient and restless. Her heart pounded as the sensation spread through her veins, warm and electric. It wasn't painful, exactly, but it wasn't pleasant either. Her body felt different, her senses sharper. She noticed the way the leaves rustled in the faintest breeze, the distant scuttle of a squirrel, the quickening heartbeats of the pack around her. And then it hit her. Her dormant werewolf instincts, locked away in her DNA like a secret no one had told her about, were waking up. Her fingers curled into the dirt, her breathing quickened, and for a split second, her mind was consumed by an image of running wild through the forest, fangs bared and freedom coursing through her. Just as the ritual reached its peak, with the ground beneath them trembling and the air crackling with energy, chaos erupted. Lila stepped forward, her usually composed face twisted into something wild and fierce. In her hand she held a dagger, its blade glinting menacingly under the moonlight. Of course it was Lila. Who else? The ever-scheming sister, the picture of grace and guile, now revealed as the true puppet master of this cursed soap opera. She wasn't here for the pack, the curse, or even Connor's questionable leadership. No, she was here for power, and she was ready to take it, one dramatic betrayal at a time. With a sharp movement, Lila slashed the air, breaking the ritual's flow. The trembling ground erupted into full-blown chaos as the energy Samantha had been channeling lashed out like a live wire. The pack scattered, howls filling the night, as the ritual backfired spectacularly. Samantha felt it all at once, a surge of power, uncontrollable and overwhelming, tearing through her like a tidal wave. Her vision blurred, her muscles tensed, and her very sense of self wavered. She was caught in a battle between her human instincts and the wolf clawing to get out. Amid the chaos, Samantha's hand brushed against something cool and familiar, her mother's journal. It had been flung to the ground in the scuffle, its pages flapping wildly in the wind. Desperate for answers, Samantha flipped through it, her shaking hands finding a passage she hadn't noticed before. And there it was, written in her mother's frantic scrawl. The curse can only be broken by severing the alpha bond. The realization hit Samantha like a brick. The alpha bond wasn't just a title or a power structure, it was the literal anchor holding the curse in place. Connor, with all his secrets and smirks, was the key. The only way to end this once and for all was to break his hold on the pack, Samantha's vision cleared as the pieces clicked into place. The pack needed a new leader, a fresh start, someone who could shatter the chains of the past and rebuild from the ruins. And if Connor wasn't willing to step down, well, she'd just have to do it herself. The wolf within her growled its agreement. The fight wasn't over, but Samantha Harper was ready. Samantha Harper sat in the middle of her cabin, knees pulled to her chest, staring at a spot on the floor like it held all the answers to life's big questions. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The journal was useless now, the pack was in shambles, and she'd nearly turned into a full-blown werewolf during a ritual gone wrong. Oh, and let's not forget the cherry on top, Lila's betrayal and Connor's ever so complicated existence as Alpha. She had tried, really she had. But what was she supposed to do now? Fight Connor? Lead a pack? Break a curse? She wasn't a hero. She was an artist who sometimes couldn't even finish a sketch. Her faith in herself was about as sturdy as a house of cards in a hurricane. Giving up felt so tempting, so easy. If the pack wanted chaos, they could have it. She was done. And then came Lucas. Of course it was Lucas. The rogue with the bad boy charm and the perfectly imperfect stubble. Somehow, he had this infuriating way of making her want to punch him and trust him at the same time. He wasn't exactly the comforting type, but something about the way he didn't give up on her made her sit up straighter. Lucas didn't sugarcoat anything. If Samantha didn't step up, nobody would. The pack needed someone strong, someone who could think with their heart and their head, and shockingly, that someone was her. His unwavering belief sparked something deep in her, a flicker of fire that refused to die, no matter how hard the storm tried to snuff it out. The fire grew into a blaze as Samantha made her choice. No more running, no more self-doubt. It was time to seize control, even if that meant stepping into a role she never wanted. Samantha marched straight into the pack's clearing with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you have absolutely nothing left to lose. She locked eyes with Connor, the alpha who had ruled with both charm and menace, and did the one thing no one dared to do. She challenged him. The pack gasped because of course they did, but Samantha wasn't about to let fear win. This was her fight now, her chance to change everything. With Lucas and a few brave allies at her side, Samantha prepared for the showdown of a lifetime. Connor wasn't alone either. Leela stood with him, her smirk as sharp as the dagger she'd nearly used to destroy them all. The tension was thicker than the fog rolling through the woods, and every wolf in the pack seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see who would emerge victorious. The fight began like a storm, fast and brutal. Samantha didn't have Connor's experience or strength, but she had something he didn't: determination. She fought with every ounce of willpower she had, channeling the wolf inside her to match his every move. Lucas and the others kept Lila at bay, ensuring Samantha could focus entirely on her opponent. The fight was messy, chaotic, and exhausting, but Samantha didn't back down. With one final surge of strength, she toppled Connor, pinning him to the ground. The alpha bond broke with a crackle of energy, rippling through the pack like a lightning strike. The curse, tethered to that bond, dissolved into nothingness. As the dust settled, Samantha stood in the clearing, her body aching but her spirit unbroken. She was different now, not fully human, not entirely wolf, but something in between. The pack stared at her in awe, their loyalty shifting as naturally as the moon's pull on the tide. Samantha took a moment to reflect. She wasn't the same woman who had stumbled into this town looking for a fresh start. She'd faced fears she didn't know she had, uncovered truths she wasn't ready to hear, and found strength she didn't think she possessed. Her transformation was bittersweet. She'd lost part of herself along the way, but she'd gained something far greater: a family, a purpose, and the chance to rebuild what was broken. Samantha stood tall as the new alpha, the weight of leadership heavy but welcome on her shoulders. The pack began to disperse, their tension replaced with cautious hope. The curse was gone, but the journey wasn't over. Samantha had a long road ahead, rebuilding trust, healing wounds, maybe even redecorating her cabin, because seriously, that place was depressing. As the moon dipped below the horizon, Samantha embraced her new reality. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a leader, a fighter, and surprisingly, a little bit of a wolf. The old Samantha was gone, but this new version, she was ready for anything. And if anyone dared to cross her path again, well, they'd have to answer to Samantha Harper, artist, reluctant alpha, an official breaker of curses.